Veep D Vance smacking George Stephanopoulos down for asking about bribery allegations surrounding border czar Tom Homan instead of the government shutdown. Why?
I've got to say, Josh, I don't know why George quit that interview so abruptly. Surely he's not so sensitive about JD calling out his dwindling audience numbers.
It happened live on national television. D Vance humiliating ABC's George Stephanopoulos so badly, the veteran anchor rage quit mid-interview. Not a glitch, not a flub, not some awkward wrap-up you could chalk up to a countdown in the earpiece. This was a full-on media detonation. October 12th, on ABC's This Week, millions watched the network's longest-serving political anchor melt down in real time, cornered on his own turf by a vice president who came in swinging. And the spark that lit the fuse? A bag full of cash, a closed FBI probe, and a border czar named Tom Homan.
White House border czar Tom Homan was recorded on an FBI surveillance tape in September 2024, accepting $50,000 in cash. Did he keep that money or give it back?
George, you've covered the story ad nauseum. Tom Homan did not take a bribe. It's a ridiculous smear. And the reason you guys are going after Tom Homan so aggressively is because he's doing the job of enforcing the law.
It started with a pointed question, not unusual for Stephanopoulos, who's made a second career out of political cross-examinations. But this time, it wasn't a softball, it was a bomb. The White House border czar Tom Homan was recorded on an FBI surveillance tape in September 2024, accepting $50,000 in cash, Stephanopoulos said, staring straight into the camera. Did he keep that money or give it back? It was blunt, confrontational, and it was bait. But Vance didn't bite, not in the way Stephanopoulos expected. George, this story's been covered ad nauseum, he fired back. It's a ridiculous smear. And from there, the interview stopped being an interview. Vance flipped the table. What followed wasn't a defense of Tom Homan. It was a frontal assault on ABC itself, on their motives, on their integrity, on their ratings, and on Stephanopoulos personally. You're losing credibility, George, Vance snapped, pushing back with the sort of unfiltered contempt that most politicians keep buried under polished talking points. The vice president accused ABC of recycling debunked allegations to pump life into a dying scandal, while the government was shut down and millions of Americans were living the consequences. Food programs stalled, military pay hanging in limbo, and this, Vance argued, is what the national press wanted to obsess over. An old sting operation that never led to charges. Stephanopoulos tried to keep control, but it slipped fast. The usually composed anchor repeated the same line again. Did he accept the $50,000? But by then the back and forth was pure combustion. Vance refused to say yes or no. He questioned the framing, the source, the definition of bribe. He called it media entrapment. Stephanopoulos interrupted again. Vance doubled down. The anchor's jaw visibly tightened.
Which is why he's working in the administration.
I'm asking you, did he accept the $50,000 that was caught on the surveillance tape? Did he accept that $50,000 or not?
George, I don't know what you're talking about. Did he accept $50,000 for what?
He was recorded on an audio tape in September 2024, an FBI surveillance tape, accepting $50,000 in cash. Did he keep that money?
Accepting $50,000 for doing what, George? I'm not even sure I understand the question. Is it
And then, without warning, came the snap. Thank you for your time this morning, Stephanopoulos said. But Vance was still mid-sentence. A moment later, ABC cut to commercial. Just like that, the screen went black. The network pulled the plug. Not only on the interview, but on the illusion of control. Because this wasn't just another awkward Sunday panel meltdown. It came just weeks after ABC quietly paid out millions in a settlement over Stephanopoulos' false claim that Donald Trump had been found liable for assault. A legal distinction that turned into a costly mistake. And after that kind of public embarrassment, the question practically writes itself. What was George trying to prove by doubling down now?
What was your reaction when you saw this exchange?
It could be as simple in terms of the interview ending. This is live television. Live television is timed.
Yes, that's true.
So this interview could have really reached its conclusion and they needed to move on to their next guest. But I think you could look at this a number of other ways, and clearly a person's political lens would love them to believe one scenario.
To answer that, we have to look at the powder keg he decided to light, the Tom Homan bribery story. This wasn't some fresh leak or anonymous memo. It had been festering in the media bloodstream since late summer. The core claim came from a September 2024 FBI sting operation, where agents posed as businessmen angling for immigration contracts under a second Trump administration. Homan, who at the time ran a private consultancy, was allegedly caught on surveillance accepting $50,000 in cash in a bag from strangers while talking policy. The investigation dragged on just long enough to reach the Biden-Trump transition, but once Trump returned to the White House in January 2025, the probe vanished from public view, and by September, the Department of Justice officially closed the case. No charges, no explanation, which made the silence all the louder.
Oh, wait, you said he didn't take a bribe, but I'm not sure you answered the question. Are you saying that he did not accept the $50,000?
George, this story has been covered ad nauseum. He did not take a bribe. Did he accept $50,000? I'm sure that in the course of Tom Homan's life, he has been paid more than $50,000 for services. The question is, did he do something illegal? And there's absolutely no evidence that Tom Homan...
The details, of course, were messy from the start. Homan gave a cautious denial in a Fox interview, saying he did nothing illegal. The White House press secretary insisted he never took the cash, but the FBI never released the full tape. And according to reporting from ProPublica and MSNBC, the agents who ran the sting were confident they had something, at minimum, evidence that Homan was open to cutting deals in exchange for future access. So when Stephanopoulos cornered Vance on camera, the goal wasn't to get clarity, it was to get confrontation, and Vance knew it. He came in prepared, not to defend Homan line by line, but to destroy the premise altogether. They needed a villain, Vance said, and this time it was Homan. That wasn't just a line, it was a strategy. Flip the narrative, make the media the story, because while Homan's situation raised plenty of eyebrows, the timeline of the sting raised even more. Why did the FBI go after Homan in September 2024, when he wasn't a public official and hadn't yet been reappointed? Why was the probe shuttered without charges? And why did the media only revive the story after the Justice Department quietly walked away? That's the context Vance drilled into. He argued that Homan had been targeted not because of what he did, but because of who he was, a familiar face in Trump world. A convenient headline in the middle of a ratings drought. And according to insiders at ABC, that accusation hit closer to home than anyone wanted to admit.
I would say everyone gets a choice on what you want to ask about, and the person you're interviewing gets a choice on how they want to answer. And JD Vance is a very skilled communicator, and he can take any topic and turn it around. And I think one of his main points is that you expect people in the country to be worried about Tom Homan in September 2024 and the FBI.
Because behind the scenes, network staff had already been dealing with fallout from that previous legal fiasco, the defamation lawsuit tied to Stephanopoulos' botched phrasing on air. The settlement, reportedly worth over $16 million, wasn't just a financial hit, it was a credibility crisis. Industry sources say Stephanopoulos had been pushing to reassert his grip on the political beat ever since, framing each Sunday slot as a chance to reclaim the narrative. But if that was the plan, it backfired spectacularly. Viewers didn't see a veteran journalist pinning down a dodgy politician. They saw a political anchor unravel under pressure, cutting off a sitting vice president mid-sentence because the interview got too hot to handle. That kind of optics doesn't go away quietly. In fact, network producers have stayed conspicuously silent since the broadcast. No follow-up segment, no social media clip, nothing, just a vacuum. And when that kind of silence comes from a major network, it's usually not about oversight, it's about fallout.
And talking about slow learners, let's check in with ABC. Let's have a look at Vice President JD Vance absolutely demolishing George Stephanopoulos, the long-term Democrat operative turned ABC News anchor, did not see this coming, and his reaction to it was to abruptly...
Meanwhile, Vance took the fight online. Within hours of the segment airing, his team was blasting out clips of the confrontation on every platform, tagging it as proof that legacy media was collapsing under the weight of its own double standards. They even coined a nickname, George Slopodopoulos, which, crude or not, immediately began trending. Not a great week for a host already on shaky footing. And then came the whispers from inside ABC. According to a former producer familiar with internal scheduling, the Homan line of questioning wasn't a spur-of-the-moment pivot, it was planned, rehearsed. A deliberate escalation pushed by senior staff as part of a post-settlement tone reset. The goal? Reassert editorial aggression. The risk? Exactly what happened, and if that's true, it would explain why Stephanopoulos seemed so agitated when Vance refused to play ball. He wasn't just losing an argument. He was watching the strategy collapse, live, on air, in front of millions.
ABC, let's not forget, was the media organization that hosted the vice presidential debate between JD Vance and Tim Walz, a truly loathsome and pathetic attempt at a moderated debate. That was actually probably the single worst moderated debate, in at least my estimation, of the entire site.
The irony here is that the Homan story, for all its flash and suspense, remains unresolved. No charges, no exoneration, no tape release, just competing narratives. And that's exactly why Vance was able to reframe the moment. By making it about the media's motives instead of Homan's actions, he shifted the pressure onto the questioner. And once that pressure broke, it triggered something far more destabilizing than a bad segment. Because when Stephanopoulos hit that commercial button, he wasn't ending the interview, he was triggering a media earthquake inside ABC that no one was supposed to talk about.
Over the other.
Is there a red line as far as how you will let a interviewee respond to you, talk to you? But I guess just from the standpoint of like approaching interviews and sometimes having them be confrontational like that.
But this type of response I've heard a million times from Republicans and Democrats, right? You ask a specific pointed question and there is not a specific pointed answer back.
Within hours, the backlash exploded. Inside ABC, according to multiple insiders who spoke off the record, the control room descended into chaos the moment Stephanopoulos cut the feed. One person familiar with the segment described the reaction as sheer panic, claiming producers feared they had just walked straight into another credibility crisis. And this time, it was live, unavoidable, and already spiraling across social media. Let's spell this out. This was the same network that had just shelled out more than $16 million to settle a defamation debacle caused by this very same anchor. Now, barely a month later, George Stephanopoulos was trending again, not for asking tough questions, but for rage-quitting an interview with the Vice President of the United States.
A weird left-wing rabbit hole. I didn't insinuate anything. I asked you whether Tom Homan accepted $50,000, as was heard on an audio tape recorded by the FBI in September 2024, and you did not answer the question. Thank you for your time this morning.
D Vance didn't miss a beat. By noon, his official account on X was already spinning the moment as a media bloodbath, calling out ABC for being obsessed with fake scandals to save its collapsing ratings. It wasn't subtle. It wasn't diplomatic. It was calculated. And by that afternoon, he'd turned a hostile interview into a political victory lap, sharing clips of the meltdown with captions like, "This is why nobody trusts them anymore." In less than 12 hours, the entire exchange had flipped from what was meant to be a journalistic ambush into a rallying cry for conservative voters who already believed the mainstream press was broken beyond repair. But here's where things start to slip behind the curtain. While official spokespeople at ABC scrambled to push a boilerplate line about a routine time constraint, newsroom whispers told a different story. According to sources close to the production team, executives had reportedly warned on-air talent earlier this month to stay aggressive when dealing with Trump administration officials or risk being quietly sidelined. A former producer who left the network this year claimed the pressure had been mounting for weeks.
You're talking for now 5 minutes with the Vice President of the United States about this story regarding Tom Homan, a story that I've read about, but I don't even know the video that you're talking about. Meanwhile, low-income women can't get food because the Democrats and Chuck Schumer have shut down the government.
In other words, this wasn't improvisation. It was a strategy. And it backfired. Because what ABC seemed to forget, or maybe just ignored, is that when the story becomes the journalist instead of the facts, they lose control of the narrative. Vance knew exactly how to capitalize on that. He didn't just dodge a question, he created a moment. One that proved, at least in the eyes of his supporters, that the press wasn't searching for truth anymore. It was picking fights just to stay in the ring. Conservative media wasted no time flooding the airwaves with looped footage of the cutoff. From Newsmax to digital-first streamers, the spin was unanimous. Stephanopoulos got rattled, lost control, and yanked the plug because he couldn't handle being challenged. And whether or not that's true, the fact that so many believed it shows just how deep the distrust runs. Meanwhile, ABC insiders pushed back, telling reporters that the decision to cut to break was a technical one, citing scheduling issues. But anyone watching could see it didn't feel like that. It felt abrupt, raw, emotional, and above all, defensive.
What was caught on the tape, you're saying right now you don't know whether or not he kept that money.
I don't know what tape you're referring to, George. I saw media reports that Tom Homan accepted a bribe. There's no evidence of that. And here's, George, why fewer and fewer people watch your program and why you're losing credibility.
That's why this story didn't just linger. It metastasized. Viewers started asking out loud whether This Week was even functioning as journalism anymore, or whether it had slipped into something closer to survival theater. With legacy media under pressure from streaming, social media, and partisan outlets on both sides, moments like this aren't just embarrassing. They're existential, because when a flagship anchor ditches an interview mid-sentence and the network refuses to explain why, it doesn't silence the noise, it amplifies it. And in that vacuum, all kinds of theories flourish. One version making the rounds among political operatives suggested that the Homan question was less about ethics and more about optics, that Stephanopoulos had been told to reassert his hard-hitting credentials after being personally humiliated by the Trump defamation settlement. According to one staffer familiar with that situation, the fallout internally had been brutal, with network leadership allegedly furious that a factual slip had cost them millions and fueled Trump's media war chest. And now, a month later, we're watching that same anchor go toe-to-toe with Trump's vice president and implode before the interview ends.
Accused Tom of violating a crime, even the far-left media like yourself. So I'm actually not sure what the precise question is. Did he accept $50,000? Honestly, George, I don't know the answer to that question. What I do know is that he didn't violate a crime.
So what happens next? Well, that's where the rumor mill spins into overdrive. One former executive who left the company last year told an industry podcast that ABC was already having very serious conversations about future roles for Stephanopoulos behind the scenes. Another person close to the talent team claimed that network leadership had begun quietly exploring transition options for the Sunday show. Phrases that don't exactly scream confidence. Of course, no official comment has been made, but the timing raises eyebrows. Was this just a bad interview, or was it the beginning of a power shift inside one of the most iconic newsrooms in America? Meanwhile, Tom Homan himself has stayed largely silent, at least publicly. The only on-record remark came from a News Nation clip where he brushed off the bribery narrative as, in his words, nonsense, insisting he did nothing illegal. But the original surveillance tape allegedly recorded by undercover FBI agents still hasn't been released, and the administration has made no move to declassify or disclose it. That lack of transparency leaves just enough space for both sides to spin their own version of events. One where Homan is either a targeted patriot or a political fixer who slipped through the cracks. We still don't have the answer. But what's becoming painfully clear is that the question itself has been hijacked.
It would be a much more interesting story about why is it that Tom Homan, who is simply enforcing Americans' immigration laws, is getting constantly harassed and threatened to the point of threats. That's a much more interesting question that I think journalists should focus on. We can agree to disagree on that question.
Because Stephanopoulos wasn't just asking about a bag of cash. He was trying to frame a bigger narrative, one about corruption, influence, and the integrity of government appointments. But once the interview blew up, all of that vanished. And in its place, we got a fresh reminder that the media battles of 2025 aren't really about facts. They're about perception, about dominance, about who gets the last word, and who hits the mute button first. Even more telling, the speed at which this story vanished from ABC's own channels. By Monday, the segment had been quietly buried on their website, trimmed down to a 2-minute clip with the confrontation conveniently edited out. That's not editorial judgment, that's damage control. And in the digital age, it doesn't work, because as long as the full clip lives online, uncut, unfiltered, and replayed millions of times, viewers will keep asking, why did a seasoned anchor with decades of experience lose control so completely?
He gets really preposterous. I know Tom. I think that he's a good man. He gets threats. He gets attacked. He gets constantly threatened by people because he has the audacity to want to enforce the country's immigration law.
It's hard to shake the feeling that something larger is slipping here, not just at ABC, but across the media landscape. As more outlets lean into confrontation for clicks and scripted outrage masquerades as investigation, the lines are blurring fast. And people notice. That's why this moment hit so hard, not because of what was said, but because of what it revealed. That behind the polish and the professionalism, even the biggest names are scrambling for relevance. And when the mask slips, it doesn't go back on easily. Because if D Vance is right, and this was never about Tom Homan's $50,000, then what else are they manufacturing just to stay alive on air? Are we watching journalism or a network clinging to a script that stopped working years ago? Let us know what you think. Was this a rare meltdown or a glimpse into something deeper? Drop your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe for more exposés like this one. Until next time, stay sharp and stay curious.